and shown in the sights. It was springtime, like today. They'd lodged above a jeweller's and watchmaker's in the Strand and walked to Westminster Abbey in the sunshine to see Poets' Corner. They stood here, not then crowded with novelists. And this part of the South transept had begun its literary life when an Oxford undergraduate had found a wrecked grave. It was that of Geoffrey Chaucer, who died in 1400. It's now 1556. And this student collected Chaucer's bones and had them placed in a wonderful tomb with a canopy, which is the finest in Poets' Corner, paying for it himself, and setting in process our honouring of literary genius. A few feet away on the outside wall, Caxton set up the first English printing press to publish the Canterbury Tales. And as we've seen, Clare had been loaned Keats's Chaucer, and he treasured it. It was the translation by Cowden Clarke, Keats's headmaster at Enfield School. And as Clare stood there, one of those rushings together of past and present words overwhelmed him. In the 1980s, I became friends with Michael Maine when he was Vicar of Great St Mary's in Cambridge. He was steeped in English literature, and he loved John Clare. He became Dean of Westminster very soon after the John Clare Society had been founded. And he knew about Clare's visit to Poets' Corner. And one evening when I was staying at the deanery here, he said, "Don't you think Clare should be there?" And the rule was to have a candidate supported by 3 signatures. So I chose those of Ted Hughes, who was a friend of mine, who was then the Poet Laureate, and of Leas Pritchett, who was president of the Society of Authors, and Angus Wilson, who lived near me in Suffolk, who was president of the Royal Society of Literature. And on the great day, Ted Hughes and myself, he unveiled one of the last stone monuments to be placed in Poets' Corner. Later writers, and overlooked ones like Herrick and Oscar Wilde, would have to have their names engraved on windows. And John Clare was next to Matthew Arnold, for no reason other than space. And on it, the Abbey surveyor had carved a bird carrying a sprig of clary, which is his fanciful interpretation of Clare's name. And this plant, Salvia vernafca, which is wild clary, used to be planted on graves in the Middle Ages, in the belief that it conferred immortality on those buried there. And Clare would have enjoyed the botanical associations, but would not have much minded if, as Green is the origin of English surnames, he read that his name probably derives from the occupation of Clare, or plasterer. But for me, it's always had something to do with clarity, or Clare in Suffolk, or just bright air with language. And so before I came here, I made a huge midsummer cushion out of wildflowers from the field near my house to lay here, and carried on the train. It was awfully hilly, I might say. And the Helpston school children brought the descendants of the plants which Clare saw at Helpston to bring here too. And then we sang his bitter hymn, "A stranger once did bless the earth." And Ted Hughes read The Nightingale's Nest. And as the poet Edward Story said, "And there you were today, your name engraved on stone, where all the world comes to respect a nation's poets, Chaucer, Milton, Blake, and those who would have followed your brief fame, Hopkins, Hardy, and T.S. Eliot." And about 10 years later, they're still absorbed in the memorial business as the John Clare Society hands over Tom Bates' plaque of the poet in profile, mounted in the new John Clare Lecture Theatre at Nottingham Trent University. Once, Clare had sat for a painter, a sculptor, and a photographer. All 3 looked deeply into his features. And Tom Bates had him in mind when he made his bust. In John Clare's day, there was a passion for likenesses because there was no photography. And the longing that faces should not vanish in time. Shortly after his visit to Poets' Corner, Clare wrote to John Taylor, who was their publisher. He said, "I'm very sorry for poor Keats. The symptoms of his illness, I think, very alarming, as we have people in the same way here." He meant where he lived, Helpston. How this disease creeps on for a little while, then proves death is struck at the root. And he said, "My only master, whom I lived with when a boy at the Blue Bell, went off in this way. So be sure to tell Keats to take care of his cold." So Clare, old, noble, slightly mad, tidied up, lived into photography. And our contemporary sculptor, Anthony Gormley, uses his own body and those of individuals who in the ordinary way have not been carved or moulded. And so we think of images all the time when we come to here. We look into Clare's face and look up at him still. Well, I've given, I suppose, over 30 John Clare lectures and talks. And somehow he is indefatigable. There's so much in his work and in his background to do with agriculture, which I understood, and so much to do with his kind of higher bit of East Anglia, really, and so much to do with the people who love him, because our society is now one of the biggest literary societies in this country. And we go on his birthday, as near to it as you can, on the 12th of July, to Helpston, and we walk about where he walked, where he worked. We see where he met his friends, Bilston Brothers, where he did archaeology, where he was both learned and sort of countrified, and we come extremely near to him. Sometimes literary societies are just academic, but I think with John Clare, he crosses every boundary to do with the countryside, with work, with sickness, with friendship, with everything, particularly to do with our native places. We carry him with us wherever we are. It's wonderful to come here again, the second time, to remember him with his equals in Westminster Abbey, these great writers we love, who educated us, gave us a new language, inspire us. And here they are, brought together in this place from Tudor times, and it's marvelous to be here with you all who love John Clare.